So hopefully you were able to interpret the cave fish example. This is such a cool example of evolution. It's very like X-Men. These fish, so you can see them in the picture here, where normally they would look like this. They have no eyeballs. They've lost their pigment. All this is going on. They've seemingly evolved to this underwater, underground cave environment where there's no light and there's no reason to see. And so researchers were really wondering why. Why do they not have eyes? What's causing this to happen? And one of the things they were looking at are these heat shock proteins. Now, heat shock proteins are a normal protein in our bodies as well. They sort of serve as suppressors of genes that you would normally express if they weren't there. So they're kind of holding on to the DNA and saying, no, 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 don't express this particular gene. So it turns out that we have all kinds of weird mutations in our DNA, and fish do, and other organisms, that are suppressed, that are turned off with these heat shock proteins in normal conditions. But then when we're under high stress, it actually lowers the heat shock proteins, which takes the off switch off the DNA, and we start expressing these random mutations. It's sort of an adaptive feature such that, if you have these random mutations and by chance one of them could be beneficial in a really high stress situation or a changing environment, then you're going to have an advantage. And so it's sort of like having these hidden superpowers like X-Men, these mutations that we have in our bodies that if we're given the right circumstances where the stress is just so high to actually influence our genetics such that the heat shock protein is turned off, these weird responses can show up. And that's what's happening in these fish that's causing them to evolve very quickly to be sightless and pigmentless and all that kind of stuff. So a really cool example of evolution. Who knows what kind of mutations are lurking beneath the surface in our bodies that can help in a really stressful situation. And we know this. Anytime you've been stressed, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but I'm like stressed all the time. But when I get stressed, all kinds of weird physiological things happen in my body. It actually affects me physiologically. And I think that's part of it too. These heat shock proteins and the cortisol levels can influence what genes get expressed when you're in a high stress situation. And basically your body is trying to figure out ways around the stress by saying, well, let's try this gene and let's try this gene and let's try this gene. And so you can have some really weird things coming out, which is neat.